Hi guys, welcome to the show. My name is Seb Ostrovich, aka the voice of the people, and this is the Weightlifting House podcast. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Weightlifting House Weightlifting News Show. I am your host, of course, Seb Ostrovich, aka the voice of the people. Now, before we start the show this week, I wanted to mention that I have got a order in fact, not an order in, but the t-shirts have arrived. The order has turned up, so I've got a bunch of the YB Normal t-shirts back in stock again. So for everyone who's been asking me about them, they are back. You can find them on weightliftinghouse.com, probably /store, but I wouldn't bet on it because I'm not really sure. But it's on there, it's not too hard to find, so pick those up there. I also, this morning, which is kind of interesting for me, or exciting for me at least, I started using for the first time ever iMovie to create an ad for the t-shirts, and I've never really done anything like that before. I've never really made a video using some kind of media maker. So that was fun. I put that up and I sponsored it, so I don't know if you guys know this. I didn't even know this. You can pay to have your video sponsored, so it appears in different places on Facebook and Instagram. So I did that. I barely put any money into it because I don't really know if it's going to work or not. But I did that kind of see if it would work. I'm excited to kind of find out what happens with that, whether that is one of the ways that I can promote that and therefore barbells in the future, because of course I've got the barbells coming, hopefully arriving, as I've been saying, by the end of February. So if it works for the t-shirts, it might work for the barbells, and I might just have a company in my hands. So hopefully that's all going to work, but we'll find out with time. All right, let's start off with the podcast. I've got a cup of tea here, so I'm just going to take a quick sip before we start. Perfect. Okay, so we have in Romania Gabriel Sincrain, the Olympic medalist in the 85 kilo class, who has now been popped and stripped of that medal, but he is on the comeback, and he hit a 160 kilo comeback clean and jerk PR. Now, of course, I know a lot of you have seen some of his big lifts before, and yes, indeed, whilst this is still less than his all-time power snatch, yes, he has power snatched 160 before as an 85, he's got to start somewhere, and whether he gets back to his previous levels with the heightened testing that he and all athletes will be under is another story, but he is on his way back, he is trying. Whether people want him to come back after the fact that he's been popped is another story as well. But 160 on the clean and jerk. I believe he did 130, maybe even 140 on the snatch at some point recently. He is a tremendous lifter on or off drugs. But yeah, only time will tell. Now, some pretty astounding push pressing from the Russian 94 kilo lifter Igor Klimenov, who push pressed 170 kilos for a set of 4. This is almost certainly the most impressive push pressing I've seen from a 94 kilo lifter. Not the most impressive ever. I mean, of course, we've all seen Klokov push press 225 as a 105. Oh gosh, I'm blanking his name. Chingiz, the super heavyweight from Russia, push press 240 kilos. I believe the heaviest push press on film. There's a trend here, I'm just realising. These are all Russian lifters. But Igor Klimenov, the Russian 94, hit 170 for 4. I'm sure there are probably, events when 94 kilo lifters have push pressed more weight, and perhaps more weight even for reps, but on video at the very least, I believe this is the most impressive set. Now, much like with Sincrain, it's only going to be speculation really as to whether he will be back on an international stage at any time soon, or even at all, of course, with the Russians having been popped. Okay, so now this isn't necessarily the most impressive video, but Max Ater, the head coach of Team Juggernaut, is back doing some powerlifting. Now, whilst he has squatted around, I believe, 320 kilos in the past, including a 272 kilo no squat, for those of you who do not know, that is no wraps, no belt, and no hands, it's still great to see him back squatting 210 kilos for a double. Now, speaking of Max, I heard on his podcast just yesterday, I believe, with Bros, that there is a chance that whilst Ilya may be okayed by the IWF to compete, he may not be allowed to compete in the Olympics, as the Olympics are working to push banning anyone who has tested positive at least one time at the Olympics, and of course Ilya has been popped twice now. So, of course, the IOC and the IWF are two different entities, and IWF sort of, it's got the World Championships and various other events, but it always wants to be involved in the Olympics, and it's the IOC that decides whether the IWF is involved or not. And so the IWF has, as far as we know, allowed Ilya to return in 6 months. Therefore, he will have served his 2-year ban. But it's not necessarily certain that the IOC will let him back. The 24-year-old 69-kilo lifter from Malta, Yasmin Stevens, made some headlines last week as she released a clip of a video that is being made of her, an athlete who has 50 national records to her name. She is also the only senior athlete from Malta ever to compete at the Europeans. She posts pretty regularly, most recently a video of her squatting 120 kilos for a set of 6, relatively easily. I'm struggling to think what her Instagram handle is, though I'm sure if you just type in Yasmin, Yazmin, she'll pop up almost instantly. One of the most exciting underground athletes in the USA today is Marcus Carrasco from Average Bros. I can't speak highly enough of this guy. He literally has, I believe, something like 600 followers on Instagram, which is crazy because he is posting some phenomenal lifting. So Bros really is doing a good job hiding him away from the spotlight whilst he develops him into a top athlete. Marcus, as a 77-kilo lifter, recently squatted one of the most impressive grinders at 245 kilos. Grinding out heavy singles is something, of course, not foreign to any of Bros' athletes because, of course, they do max out every single day, often as many times as 20 squat sessions to max in a single week. Marcus also snatched 130 kilos for a cluster set of 5. I suppose technically it was 5 singles. You can't really call it a set of 5, but he can't have taken more than 30 seconds rest in between singles, so that's very impressive, of course, from him. He may end up with as much potential as Angelo, potentially, Bros' other 77-kilo lifter, the Pan Am medalist from 2017. Another very impressive lift from Marcus, and incredibly underappreciated, didn't really receive as much attention as it ought to, was a 182.5-kilo clean and jerk, which is 401 pounds. So he's finally gone over 400 pounds in the clean and jerk. Now, this is the same PR as I think James Tatum had as a 77. I know that James has done 185 as an 85-kilo lifter, but at 77, I don't know if James ever did anything more than 182.5. So, it's so impressive from Marcus, especially without receiving any attention. So, yes, go follow Marcus. His Instagram handle is Carrasco Marcus. I'm sure if you type in Marcus or even just go on Bros' page, you'll be able to find him because he will do huge things as a 77, especially with Harrison Maris now moving up to 85. He kind of has a slightly easier time of becoming a national champion. Now, news for the recently popped Sonny Webster as he makes the transition from weightlifting to CrossFit. So a few months ago, as you all remember, Sonny was popped for Ostarine. And now that he faces this kind of 2-year ban, or potentially it might be more, I'm not sure, but I believe it's 2 years, he is almost certainly unable to qualify for Tokyo because he won't have time once he returns. And so it was no real weightlifting for him to accomplish. It almost seemed obvious that CrossFit would be his route. I wonder what will be happening with him competing now in CrossFit. I remember with Charis Chan, who was popped for weightlifting a few years ago. So she was popped in weightlifting, but she also competed in CrossFit. And so as a result, CrossFit then popped her, despite not having actually tested her. They kind of took the fact that she was popped by USAW as a sign that we ought to pop her as well. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with Sonny Webster for that. Now, just kind of going off script a little bit here, I'm interested to know, I would love to interview Sonny and talk to him about, some people are convinced, they believe that he accidentally took Ostarine, and some don't believe him, some think that he purposely took it. Either way, that's not really the point. What I'd be interested to asking him is, now that he knows, intentionally or not, that he has taken Ostarine, how does that make him feel knowing that his lifts were enhanced and were better than they would have been had he not taken any Ostarine? It's interesting because, of course, you say, it's such a shame that he inadvertently took this Ostarine or whatever, but people very much then tend to excuse the fact that he'd done it and ignore the fact that his lifts were therefore enhanced. And I'd be really interested to know what he kind of thinks about the fact that his lifting in recent competitions were were higher than they probably ought to have been, and how he feels, with other lifters that he took the place of from the UK. I don't know. I'd be very interested to do that. He has never actually replied to me on Instagram. He's, in fact, I believe the only athlete that I've ever messaged who hasn't gotten back to me, other than Nuruddinov, but I can excuse Nuruddinov because I don't think he speaks English. In fact, no, he does speak English, but not particularly well, so that is fair enough. But I would love to get Sonny on at some point, so if anyone does know Sonny, please badger him to message me, because it would be really interesting to talk to him about his weightlifting career and his switch, of course, to CrossFit. Now, it is great to see the one and only Spencer Moorman, aka More Man Than You, going heavy off blocks on the clean this week. He knocked out a 193 kilo lift, which, if you've been lifting for a fair few years, you may remember is only 2 kilos under the lift that Spence hit to win the battle off the blocks with Tom Sroka back at Cal Strength many, many years ago. Of course, Spence was a super back then, and he has since, as he reminded me literally just a few days ago, he has cleaned 210 kilos off blocks, which I think is equal to his best ever clean as a super heavyweight. In fact, now that I'm saying it, I believe that's not even true. I believe that 210 off the blocks is an all-time clean PR, regardless of body weight. Now, British weightlifters aren't necessarily known for their leg strength. Myself definitely included in that statement. But it seems that our 94 kilo national champ, Cyril Fajat, is turning that all around. He squatted 6 triples at 220 kilos with relatively quick speed. Now, some of you listening from America or other countries around the world may think 6 triples at 220, not that impressive for a 94 kilo lifter, but when you see the speed and mobility that Cyril has, it's actually pretty promising, especially with the speed that he was able to stand up the squats. Cyril really does have a huge amount of talent, and he's one of the lifters that I've been in contact with over the last week about competing at the Weightlifting House competition that I'm going to be hosting later on in the year. So that's pretty exciting. So for those of you who don't know Cyril, I believe over the last year or two he's only been able to train a few times a week because of his education commitments, I guess you could call it. I think he's been studying. So now that he's able to train properly, it's kind of exciting to see what he can do. He was able to clean over 190 training just a few times a week and snatch over 150. So now that he's, I believe, able to train full time, he may be able to do some pretty devastating things in the British weightlifting world. Now, more impressive in the squats than Cyril, but perhaps less so in the lifts, was Sir Owen Murphy from Ireland, Clarence Kennedy's training partner, who posted some of the most absurdly impressive squats I have absolutely ever seen. As impressive as his set at 220 was, he did a set of 10 with 220 kilos. More impressive still was the fact that he did, I won't say what he did yet. What he did was he tried to emulate what powerlifting legend Stan Efferding had done and squat 200 kilos for a set of 20. So he loaded up the bar, he started repping it out. He actually had to post it over 2 Instagram videos because the set took so long. But unfortunately, as pointed out by Owen himself, he is absolutely, for some reason, unable to count. Probably because there was no oxygen going up to his brain by the end of the set. But he was unable to count, and so he dropped the bar after 19 reps, which is just truly, truly gutting for him. I'm sure he could have done 20. The 19th rep was almost as quick as the first. He's incredibly strong. And I'm sure if he ever tries to go for it again, he'll be able to do it. He may even be able to do 210 for 20 at some point soon. Now, Madlifts, aka Morgan McCullough, snatched 120 kilos, which officially means that I have now been outsnatched by a 14-year-old weightlifter. I'm not particularly upset. He is an extremely impressive athlete, and 120 is an amazing snatch for anyone of that age. Speaking of talented younger lifters, CJ Cummings, the 16-year-old 69-kilo lifter, snatched 130 kilos this week, just 10 kilos under his PR and his own senior American record of 140. He also front squat and power jerked 177 kilos, which is 8 kilos under his best lift ever, which, as I'm sure you basically all know, is the American senior record and is also the youth world record. What is so impressive about CJ is how easy the push jerk was. I'd love to know what he could actually push press. I was speaking to my friend Seth, who I mentioned on the podcast last week, because of his amazing snatches. We believe that he can push press something pretty incredible. I wouldn't be surprised if he was close to 160 kilos on the push press. On a different day, CJ also did a bunch of full clean and jerks with 175 kilos, but instead of squat jerking them, as he's been doing over the last few months, he power jerked all of them. Now, I don't know if this is something that he and his coach are going for, but the jerks certainly look so easy without squatting the whole way down. There are a few different types of squat jerkers. You've got the people like Badzanian or like someone who looks a little bit nicer like Apti, who essentially power jerk and get lower and lower as they have to, as the weight goes up. Or you have lifters like Lou who just go down regardless of the weight. So I'm wondering if perhaps CJ is going to become one of those more like Apti style lifters who's going to catch the jerk as high as he can, but has no fear of squatting deep if he has to. Now, during Megan Siegert's road to the Junior Nationals, for those of you who don't know, Megan Siegert is the junior 48 kilo lifter in the USA. She looks absolutely fantastic as she snatched 76 kilos just so perfectly at Hassle-Free Barbell Club where she trains. Megan holds the junior snatch record at 78 kilos, and so this very casual-looking 76 kilos is definitely promising for her. The national record belongs to Morgan King, which I think she set in Rio at 83 kilos. So Megan is only 5 kilos away from that and still a junior. So she, of course, has a lot of promise. Now, I don't exactly know what Matty Rogers was lifting because she lifts on those black plates, so you can never really tell. But if you want to see a brutal training session, check out her Instagram. She said that she did 9 triples on the snatch, and then, far worse in my opinion, she did 3 plus 4s on the clean and jerk. So 3 cleans plus 4 jerks. 3 cleans and 4 jerks is just awful. It's the kind of thing that I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. There's nothing worse after cleaning a weight 3 times than jerking it 4 times. So awful. But she does seem to do pretty well off high volume training. I remember her doing 10s more regularly than I remember seeing most people do 10s. Even in the front squat, I've seen her do it. So, I suppose as a taller, slimmer athlete, perhaps she may need the 10s to help keep up her muscle mass or even just to build muscle mass. I'm not sure if she's... I mean, as far as I know, she has completely filled out the class. Perhaps she's going to go up one day, perhaps not, but I think generally 10s work for taller, slimmer lifters. Nathan Damron, the 94 kilo lifter, clean and jerked 195 kilos. Now, the speed at which he stands up the weight is absolutely extraordinary. He stands it up like Ilya Ilyin would. If only he could go up another 40 kilos like Ilya Ilyin can. I don't mean that in any in a harsh way at all. Nathan's an incredible lifter, but I just think it's kind of interesting, as a fan to watch, and you can see that they basically stand up 195 kilos the same. But Ilya clean jerks another 40 kilos on top of that. It's interesting actually because, many times, myself included, people talk about how the squat is kind of like the biggest driver of success in weightlifting, but you can see that it's not necessarily when Nathan and Ilya have not the same squats at all. I know Ilya has front squatted 290, but they stand up 195 with the same kind of speed, but one of them is absolutely dominant over the other. Okay, so the next lift is something that just have to be mentioned. Since breaking the world record in the clean and jerk and total before getting popped and losing everything, Alexei Lovchev, the Russian super, and in my opinion best challenge for Lasher should he ever return, he has been competing in strongman. Now, I've always wondered when watching strongman why the strongmen never clean or jerk the axle. And I do know, really, I know the bar doesn't spin, or in fact the axle doesn't spin, and it is really tough to rack because it's so girthy, I suppose is the word. But you almost have to be far stronger in many ways to pull it the way that the strongmen do than to just drop under it like a weightlifter would do. So, well, in truly epic fashion, Lovchev walks up to a 173 kilo axle and pulls it with a mixed grip, but then he drops under it, reverses his grip, racks it in a deep clean, and proceeds to stand up and very easily push press the weight overhead. I would love it if this was somehow the start of a trend. Perhaps he can convince other strongmen that maybe this is the way forward. I know this is still, maybe 50 kilos less than the world record in this event, but still, it's cool to see for someone who's had relatively little strongman experience in the past, able to do 173 kilos with such ease. I suppose the fact that he has clean and jerked 91 kilos more than that in competition probably helped to some extent. Now, Deng Wei, the Chinese 63 kilo lifter, the world and Olympic champion, posted an amazing video of her snatching 105 kilos for multiple singles. Her technique is just about as perfect as it gets. Her positions, rhythm, speed, and strength are all incredible. If you type in Deng or Wei or Deng Wei on Instagram, you'll be able to find her page, because she recently, within the last couple of weeks, has started up an Instagram page. Okay, now on to the final section, the new section. I still haven't completely decided on a name. Last week I called it Average Athletes, but as I was told by many people, that is potentially a bit rude, because some of these athletes are amazing. So someone said maybe you should call it Amateur Athletes. I've had a bunch of suggestions. I'm still not convinced. I was told, I can't remember what it was, something about shadows was another idea for the name. I can't quite remember, but I'm going to go with Amateur Athletes this week, and I have 3 athletes who I thought were superb in training. I saw their videos on Instagram, and I wanted to give them shout-outs because, when you don't necessarily lift as much as these world champions and national champions, you don't get the credit you deserve when you grind out or hit an impressive lift. So, firstly, I'm going to start with Dustin Baranowski, who is a friend. I do apologize for that, but I'm still, it's my show. I can choose people that I know. Dustin Baranowski hit an 80 kilo clean grip double snatch. For those of you who know him, he has amazing technique, and more than anything in the world, he wishes to be Norik Vardanian. And so he's been doing all of these clean grip doubles, or no contact, no feet, no hook kind of lifts. And if I'm completely honest, this 80 kilo clean grip double on the snatch did look completely gorgeous. He has phenomenal technique. I've actually posted him on the Weightlifting House page before, because he was at the training camp and he hit an amazing snatch PR whilst I was out there, 120 kilos. So if you want to follow Dustin, you can find him at dustin.baranowski. It sounds like a complicated last name, but it's really easy to spell, so I'm sure you can work it out. Dustin, well done on the 80 kilo clean grip double snatch. Next, we have Elizabeth Bradley, who you can find at E_Bradley. She hit a 170-pound hip snatch PR, which is just over 77 kilos. Now, despite being a CrossFitter, her speed and depth was truly awesome, and you could really see her passion come through at the end. She screamed. She was so happy with the lift. And in many ways, to be honest, she puts a lot of weightlifters to shame with her technique. It was a beautiful lift. I'm not sure what her actual PR is from the floor, but 77 kilos from the hip for a CrossFitter is amazing, and is certainly more than almost every weightlifter in her weight class in the country. So a big shout out to her. Again, if you want to see that, that's E_Bradley. Finally, my boy William Tomlin. I know he's laughing right now listening to this, and so are many of you who know who he is. So William, or as we call him, Foz, was in the original Weightlifting House, the actual house where the concept of Weightlifting House began. And he's been a friend of mine for years. I studied with him. I trained with him every single day. And one of his things that he's very good at is anything overhead and squatting. And he recently hit a PR on the pause back squat with 210 kilos. And I know he wanted me to shout it out, even though he may not have said so. So I'm finally going to post that. His Instagram handle is WTomlin105, I believe, even though he's going to hate me for saying this, but he's definitely not a 105. He's certainly a super heavyweight, the amount of food he's been eating recently. But I'm allowed to say that because he's a friend, and in the UK, we take the mick out of our friends severely. So, Foz, well done on the 210 pause back squat. You can find him, as I say, at WTomlin105. I believe that is now the end of the Weightlifting House news show. I hope you all enjoyed it. That show was a little bit more off the cuff. I'm sorry that I've posted this a couple hours later than usual, but as I say, it is on Wednesday, and I make sure that I put up a news show every single Wednesday. If you haven't heard Monday's show, I did a great podcast with Danny Lear. We kind of took it away somewhat from the weightlifting, from the numbers, and it was more to do with building a building a life or making a living through your passion. For those of you who don't know, Danny Lear is the CEO of Caffeine and Kilos, and so he really is a master in this kind of area. He has been able to make a thriving business out of something he loves, something that we all love, and he has certainly benefited, he has certainly improved the lives of many, many people out there, even through just wearing a nice Caffeine and Kilos t-shirt. So if you want to listen to that on how to build a business and that kind of stuff, for me that's very interesting, obviously, with what I'm going through at the moment. So you can find that, of course, at the same place that you found this podcast. I do believe that is absolutely everything. Like I said at the start of the show, YB Normal t-shirts are back in stock. You can find them on weightliftinghouse.com. And actually, I've just remembered this as I'm talking. Apple, or in fact iTunes, have done a great update where if you're on your phone listening to this on iTunes, you can actually write a review for the show. You don't have to go on your computer and open up iTunes, which I don't know if this is the same for everyone else, but is always incredibly laggy and slow on whatever laptop I open iTunes on. So you can actually do this from your phone. I would appreciate it immensely. It is such a big driver of success for a podcast to have ratings and stars, even if you just 5-star it. You can 0-star it, I suppose, but I'd rather you didn't. Give it a rating, an honest review. I don't want to force your hand to do anything. Give it a 5-star if you don't think it's a 5-star, but it would be very much appreciated if you could do that for me. Anyway, thanks once again for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll speak to you all next Monday on the standard show, and of course next Wednesday on the Weightlifting News Show.